Let me see. First thing, do we have any Marines in the house? No Marines. Okay. All right. I asked that because today is November 10th. 1775 is when the Marine Corps was established. So today is Marine Corps birthday. And as a Navy chaplain, 17 of my years was spent ministering and serving to Marines. But there are sailors here, and soldiers here, and airmen here, and coasters here, and tomorrow is Veterans Day. So I have to say Happy Veterans Day to all my fellow men and women who served and loved and cared and sacrificed, and to their parents and their children and their spouses. We say thank you for letting us serve you, and God bless you real good. And we're also approaching the holiday seasons. Thanksgiving's coming up, and Christmas is coming up. So since the schedule allows me this month to have two times, we're going to have a two-part type sermon, a little series. So today it'll be Table Talk 1, and next week will be Table Talk 2. Table Talk 1 will be a story where we talk about some of the protocol about how we can have a good family gathering. If we were to read in the Gospel of Luke, in the 10th chapter, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened up her home. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that she had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So this sermon is Table Talk 1. Guess who's coming to dinner? Yes, I borrowed the sermon title from a movie, classic movie from back in the 60s. Some of you may remember the Sidney Poitier, Spencer Tracy, Catherine or Audrey Hepburn, one of the Hepburn sisters, Catherine Hepburn, about a young lady who brings home this young black doctor as her husband to be. And everybody's upset about who's coming to dinner, what's going on. It was a very interesting movie. I always, but sharing meals is an ancient cultural thing in almost every culture in the world. People have always gotten together to share meals together, maybe for survival. Because, their early cultures were often hunters and gatherers. Often the men went out and did the hunting, and the women did the gathering. They gathered the fruits, the nuts, and the berries, and the vegetables. And the men would go to hunt down the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and the deer and the elk and the rabbits and all those kind of things. And they would come together with the catch. And people would put everything together. And that's how they survived. They ate together. They shared meals together. But we also would find in those days that persons would have meals together for revival. Because a gathering of people with a common history and common culture and common hopes, it will be a time for hope and renewal when people got together to say, let's find a way to work things out. Let's find a way to fellowship together. Let's find a way to grow together. Revival, celebration, renewal, hope, and a future together. These meals were often religious ritual. There was something about what they understood themselves to be in a world where God had created and sustained and allowed and interfered and corrected and chastised and established who they were. I mean, we can look in the Bible, for example, of the faith training. You know, in the Bible, there's a story of the Israelites who were captured and how Moses went down to the promised land and told old Pharaoh, let my people go. And at the end of all those plagues, the last thing was the death angel was going to come to kill the firstborn. But the people of Israel were instructed, kill a lamb, take the blood, put a marking over your home. And when the angel of death comes, it will pass over you. You will be delivered. You will be protected. You are clean. You are chosen. You are mine, says the Lord. And so that meal in particular became a meal of ritual significance. It became a meal that reminded them of a faith lesson. Trust in the Lord. Live according to His will and His way. And you will experience deliverance. Why? If you look at 2 Chronicles 35:18, this tells the story of Josiah. Josiah was one of the good kings of Israel. He was one who was obedient after seeing how Israel had gone astray for many years. Because God established the Passover, and they were supposed to celebrate that every year. But you know, people sometimes get caught up into their own thing, what they like to do, and then soon they find they weren't celebrating the Passover. And years went by when the Passover meal was not celebrated. And then Josiah led the nation into a revival period. And they rediscovered what they should have been doing. And there in 2 Chronicles, it talks about how Josiah had all the law things and had all the priests and everybody, the people, to get together everything they needed for a Passover. Because that was important. A ritual meal of significance for faith training. And they started celebrating the Passover again. And now when Jesus comes along and he's with his disciples, we see in the Gospel of Mark where right as he's getting toward the end of his life, right when he's getting ready to sacrifice himself, not just for redemption from physical slavery, but for salvation, redemption and freedom from all sins, he makes sure that he and his disciples will have the Passover. And we find there in Mark the 14, it's in all the Gospels where Jesus makes preparation. It says, where shall we meet for the Passover meal? And he tells the apostles to go and to prepare a place. Find a place that he's designated and prepare this meal, because this ritual meal is important. And we know the elements of the Passover, of the wine, like the blood, and the unleavened bread, which had to be baked in a hurry when they were getting out of Egypt. Those all things became what we know today as the Lord's Supper. Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. And he gave himself for us for the forgiveness of our sin and of our hopes. And even today, the Jewish community still has the Seder meal. They have all the special things. They have the wine, reminding them of the blood. They have the salt water, which reminds them of the tears. They have the bitter herbs, which reminds them of the hardships of the sin. They have the matzah, the unleavened bread, which we now take as the body of Christ. These are things that are part of that ritual coming together and eating. But we have our own as Americans and as Christians. Thanksgiving, faith training. When we tell again the story, the myth or the legend of the colonizers with the Native Americans, and how after a very tough winter, they come together and they share some resources and they have this meal. And every year, we have the big holiday in America. It's this Thanksgiving meal. And we learn. Anybody else grow up where you have this meal, and part of Thanksgiving meal is you have to go around the table and say, I'm thankful for it. I'm thankful for my little brother. I'm thankful for my new bike. I'm thankful for a nice teacher. I thank you for this. I thank you for my parents who love me. I thank you that Susie will go to the prom with me. You know, we find things that we're grateful for. What has God provided us for? Thanksgiving. But we also know, I hear, in some places, people have arguments with family members about certain topics at Thanksgiving. And people dread that. And so some of the sweetness of the home cooked meal and the preparation there is sometimes lost. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can prepare ourselves, and by looking at Mary and Martha, it's things to tell Christmas. Matter of fact, in my household, we had Sunday dinner. Every Sunday was a bigger meal. They usually, grandma, and my dad's mom lived with us pretty much from the time I started school. You know, she'd get up and she had the cooking done before we went to church. They put it in the oven for stay hot. This is before microwave. Just sort of, you know, cut the oven off, close the door for a couple hours. It seemed like something like 4 hours. Sunday school and church. But we finally get back on, though. We finally get back on and we eat. In the late 1990s, there was a movie called Soul Food, which was centered around this family who had this wonderful mac and cheese and collard greens and cornbread and turkey and ham and roast beef and rolls and all this kind of food. And it was their family tradition to get together. And as a lot of siblings did, they would fight and squabble about things, but Big Mama would say, all right now. And they sit down at the table and they would eat together and laugh and joke. And as happens in life, Big Mama died. And the family was in disarray. And they didn't get together anymore. And things got worse and worse. Then finally, the children decided, this is not right. We've got to start getting back together and have that soul food. The mealtime. And many people aspire to be a great host. They want to be like Big Mama was. And I've talked to you all many times about Mother Maybelle, and just when she could say, I know it's good, I made it myself. You know, and we'd say, yeah, she put her foot in it. It's so good. So good. But here we have a person who really wants to be a great host for a meal gathering of family and friends, and that's going to happen a lot. And it's very popular. It's needed. You know, there's even an app now. Young people who miss the whole thing of family meetings and getting together. They give it an app to try to get together themselves. I know my daughter likes sometimes going to Friendsgiving, where you get together with your friends because they don't want to arguing at home. But they realize there is something enriching and something lovely and something enjoyable as we get together as friends and family. Many people aspire to be a great host for a meal gathering of family and friends. And here's the main thing I want to take away today. Here's the main thing. When you dare to host a big meal gathering, ensure that the greatest and lasting impact is how those who gathered around the table for your hospitality felt about being there. The main thing I want us to carry out today is to think about when the dishes are washed and put away and everybody's gone, how did the people who sat around that table feel about being accepted and loved and forgiving and cared about? Were you so worried about being a good hostess that you missed creating that loving atmosphere? I think that's what happened with the story of Mary and Martha. Let's relook at that story again. So, as they were going, as Jesus and his disciples were traveling along, a woman by the name of Martha invited them into her home. Martha had a sister named Mary who sat at Jesus' feet and listened. Stop right there. Stop right there. That right there shows you a lot about the character. Martha is clearly a very generous person. She hears that Jesus, and if you read the Bible, you'll see that Jesus and Martha and Mary and their brother and Lazarus, they're pretty close to the group. But the Messiah, the rabbi, the teacher, who's going around giving new hope for Israel, is coming to our town. And she opens up her house to him. It tells us right there, Martha is a generous person. She wants to be a good host for the coming Messiah, the King of Jerusalem, the King of Israel. She wanted to do right by him. And she said, if you're in town, come on by. And her sister hears that Jesus is coming to dinner. And she understands this is the Messiah. This is the teacher. This is the promised one. He's coming to dinner. I'm not going to miss a word of what he says. I'm going to sit at his feet. And that's what a disciple, a follower would do, would sit at the feet of the teacher and listen and absorb and to gain whatever it was. And if that teacher got up and started walking along, what's the disciple? The disciple is the one who gets the dust on his clothes from the footprints of the master, because you're so close and so determined to know and hear and see and experience what that master, that teacher, that rabbi has. So we see Martha, who loves Jesus so much she wants to serve him, and Mary, who loves Jesus so much she just wants to sit there and listen and soak it up. Two wonderful things. But then the story goes on. But Martha was too distracted by all the things that she had to prepare. Okay. Martha's a good hostess. She invited Jesus in. But she's distracted. And her distraction means she's not listening to the lesson. Not only does she not listen, she interrupts the lesson, does not, and says, "Don't you care?" to Jesus. Probably put her hands on her hips. I've imagined this scene so many times. Because I know how, as an older brother, how I could be. And I've also seen how older sisters sometimes give with younger sisters. So I can imagine there's all kind of non-verbals going on as Martha's rushing, trying to get this ready and get this ready, get things ready, and Mary's sitting there. She's sitting there listening. To the point where Martha is so distracted, she interrupts the lesson and says, "Don't you care?" She asked Jesus, "Don't you care? Don't you? Does Jesus care?" Have you ever felt that way though? You ever been having a hard time in the struggle in life, and if you didn't dare say it, you thought it to yourself, "Jesus, do you care? Do you get me? Do you see me? Do you catch me? Do you see where I am? Don't you care? Do you know what I'm going through? Do you know? Do you know, Jesus, what I'm going through?" And that's what Martha said. It's like, I'm doing this for you. Have you ever been like that? "Lord, I've raised these children. I've worked in this church. I worked in this school. I've done this for you, Lord. Don't you care? All the burden I'm carrying for you." Wow. Can you imagine saying to Jesus, "Don't you care?" Wow. When he cares enough to come by your house. He didn't have to come by your house. That's a blessing for him to come to your house. For a blessing for him to come into our lives when we invite him in. When we say, we need you. And we want to serve you. But what is his answer? "Martha, Martha, honey, you worry about lots of things. You're upset about lots of things. But only some are necessary. Indeed, only one is the first. Mary, your sister, has chosen." And I like the way the different translations say, some say the better portion, the better part, the good portion. It doesn't say that it doesn't say what Martha's doing was bad. It's part of what needed to be done. But really, Jesus is always clear that we have to set our priorities. Spending time in the presence of Jesus, hearing Jesus' lesson, feeling Jesus' love, emulating Jesus' way, that's the priority. Sometimes we can serve, our act of service gets us to the point where we're rude to God and rude to our family members. Jesus is about giving us the ministry of reconciliation. So here's the story. Let's look at this story again as we say what could be done to avoid a problem. First of all, ensure you can accommodate the number of guests invited. Now, I'm not sure. The scripture says Jesus that Martha invited Jesus come to the house. It didn't say that he invited the whole bunch. Did she realize that when you invite Jesus, you got 13 sweaty men coming into your house who've been out on the road traveling? Can you really accommodate that? Was her generosity beyond what she was able to do? We don't know. But we just know that it's clearly this last minute hasty preparation that's going on. And when we invite people for our meal at Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it is can we accommodate it? I mean, how many times, I don't know if you do this here, but I know a lot of people who are members of church, and then around Thanksgiving time, a lot of people are borrowing chairs from the church to try to help them, because they're planning ahead to help them accommodate the number of guests that's going to be there. Because they've invited some, maybe the homeless in, or maybe they invited some military folks in, or they invited some other church members who don't have family in. They make preparation to accommodate the number of guests that are being invited. The other thing that's important is to notify your partner, or I use the term stakeholder, in advance. Did Martha tell Mary in advance that Jesus was coming to dinner? Did Martha tell Mary in advance, Jesus coming to dinner and I'm going to need your help? Because, some people are more natural hospitable and generous and intolerant. Some people just don't think about it. Mary's thinking about, I'm going to hear Jesus teach. And as big sister, maybe Martha needed to invite her to join in the planning and the preparations of saying, okay, we got a lot of people coming over. I'm going to need your help in planning it. I said, I know you want to hear Jesus. So do I. But let's work this thing together so we both can be involved in treating the guests, and we both can be involved in hearing what our master has to teach us and show us. It takes little sisterly way, little family dialogue. Don't let the person who always does it in the kitchen be the only one to be in the kitchen. Somebody else can help. Or it says, well, I'll do the cooking. Would you do the decorating? You get the table set. There are all type of ways of creating a good environment so that when your guest comes. Another thing we need to do is always be ready to listen. Listen. People have gone through some rough things in life, probably since the last time we gathered together. Are we listening to what's going on and where people may be hurting, where people may be hopeful, may need help? Listen. Don't always go with borrowing with what your agenda is. Don't get so distracted with what you feel like needs to be done. But be ready to listen. To listen, to hear, to intercede, to pray. We ask you this because I think if maybe there had been more dialogue between Mary and Martha before it all hit, it wouldn't have got so bad. And it's really easy, but we just get excited. We just get excited and we forget. The other thing, let's be careful. Make a rule. No insults. Just think it. Going up to Jesus and saying, "Don't you care?" was insulting, disrespectful. Instead of privately talking to her little sister off to the side in front of Jesus and 12 other people, she said, "My sister is not helping me." Everybody, can you imagine how humiliating that might have been for Mary? And she was just trying to be meek and humble at the feet of Jesus. She didn't need to be shamed like that. And I don't think Martha meant to shame her. But that's how it came off. When she came off, like it said, you always want your brother and sister to talk to you instead of tattling. But basically, she just tattled on Mary to Jesus. You see that? She not helping me. You want to do something. Tell her to do something. Jesus is there to teach, to reach, and to have pass on to them the ministry of reconciliation. Paul talks about that later. Mary was offensive to both Mary and Jesus. Have you ever been insulted for somebody who's working so hard for Jesus in their mind that they've hurt your feelings made you feel unworthy, unloved, uncared for, or at least just not as important as whoever somebody else was. Jesus has this opportunity for us. Mary was offensive to both Mary and Jesus. But what was Jesus' response? Basically, Jesus gave words of affirmation, speaking the love language. Some of you probably are aware of the marriage and the relationship book about 5 love languages, different ways that people express love, acts of service, words of affirmation, different things that different people like. Words of affirmation are one thing that most people like to have as part of the language. They like to be affirmed. And what Jesus did with Mary, after she may be insulted and humbled by Martha, gave her words of affirmation. You've given the better part, the good part. But didn't say that she's doing the only good thing. He's also saying to Martha, what you've done is just good. You got a portion. But the best portion is this. It's a teaching moment. Jesus, the gentle teacher, finds a way to gently teach Martha to appreciate what her baby sister's doing, and also encourages her to get involved, get the baby sisters get involved with what her sister's doing. So both of these ladies, both of these sisters can grow from this experience. And all the men folk there can say, ooh, that's a good way to handle things. That's a good way to handle things. You see how Jesus did that? Because remember, if you were to begin the 10th chapter of Luke, it's where Jesus sends people out, 70 people out to preach the gospel. It's that story. And then after they go out and they come back, and then Jesus explains to him what they did right, what they could do doing better. Jesus is one who's willing to help us improve our serve. And that's what he was doing with Mary and Martha. He said, you're serving, you're doing what you feel right in your heart. Let me tell you what the priorities should be, and these are the things you should consider. Can't this make it a happier, more healing meal? Give priority to relationship building and maintaining. The most important thing that we, as the body of Christ, need to be doing, because as I said, Paul talked to us before, and I know I've preached before about the ministry of reconciliation. What can we do to build people up? Let no unwholesome talk come from your mouth, but only that which is useful for building others up. People need to be built up. Even people we may disagree with on certain topics, about certain things. Don't tear people down. Pray for them. But when you speak to them, speak the truth in love. Give priority to relationship building and maintaining. Because Mary had chosen what matters most, the relationships. Good part, the better part, the good portion. And what Jesus wants to always try to do with us is for us to make priorities clear. And what I say is this: we should always take steps toward the ministry of reconciliation. Let people leave your home full. Can I get this? But better able to deal and face life with an attitude of thanksgiving. That they could be generous, that they could be healing, that they could be hopeful. For that's why we gather around the table, for survival and revival. Ritual training, holy significance, more and more. Folks, we don't know how much longer we have it. Make these days that we have with our people and our friends and our family days to be remembered. And days that we did what God says, because we want to hear that, well done, good and faithful servant. Well done. So that's my table talk for today. Next week, the topic is going to be a place at the table. Who gets invited to the table? And that's all I'm going to say. Tune in next week, boys and girls, for a continuation of this series. God bless you real good. Just remember that a change in your attitude can improve the experience of a good meal and family time more than that extra piece of sweet potato pie. God bless you real good.